Checked off. Hey everybody, so 2026 version of the DG complex interconnection from Massachusetts webinar. So we will go through the process. We'll record this, we'll post it, and we will try to hit on anything that's changed over the course of the last year or so. So general disclaimer, right? Stuff is subject to change. Changes pretty consistently on us, and as we try to, figure out the best way to navigate. So just everything in here is correct, as of today, as we're talking about it, but everything is subject to change. So just diving into the agenda real quick. So we'll walk through just a few general communications, so we can look at sort of the last 12-month period, number of interconnections, number of applications that we've ultimately had over the course of the last 12 months, and just a couple other quick hitters that we'll mention. We'll do the standard safety message we do here at National Grid, and then we'll jump into the steps of the complex DG interconnection process here for National Grid. We will have a simplified version, right? So we will not be touching on anything significant from a simplified interconnection space. There'll be another webinar in the next couple months. We don't have a specific date on that yet, but that's where we will address the simplified space at that time. But we'll work through screening, standard complex interconnection process. We'll talk about ASO studies that we have. Most of them are transmission based and what that looks like from an ISO perspective. We'll talk about post-connection support. We'll have our portal moment, and then we'll talk about flex connections, right? So anyone who's been part of those conversations we've been having with the regulatory bodies here in Massachusetts, right? We're continuing to push flexible interconnections forward here in the state. So we'll touch on that program as we continue to move that forward. And then we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. So we'll post in the chat now a link to submitting questions. So please submit questions through there, and then I'll address them, or as many as I possibly can, come the end of the meeting. As we get through, we'll work towards 11:30-ish, give or take, and we'll try to get through everything. So we'll kick it off with a safety message, a little bit different of a safety message. So I know we are here at National Grid, me in particular, using AI a little bit more and more, and trying to learn more about it and how we can best utilize it. But in some of that sort of diving in and embracing it, right, there's some stuff that I would have never kind of really thought about, right, from a mental health standpoint when it comes to AI. One of the things I thought was interesting to me, right, is that therapy and companionship has become the #1 use of AI. I'm not sure National Grid's version of AI is what I'm going to become best friends with, but it's something that I think happens, right, as we've all shifted to more work from home time since the pandemic, even with it being 6 years ago. Right, we all work a little bit differently than maybe we did initially when our career started. So, just the use of AI and make sure that we're using it for the right reasons. You can unknowingly become attached to an AI bot, right? Just something to be conscious of, right, as you continue to use it, as we all continue to use it more and more. So I'm not going to read every line item here on this slide. Right, but just some things to be thoughtful of, right, when using AI, whether for personal or professional reasons. Just use it for what it's there for. Realize that it does make mistakes, right, and if you are having any sort of issues with mental health, right? There is a phone number you can dial 988 for anything here in the U.S. To help with any sort of mental health crisis. So a couple of links here. Again, a few more bullet points, but just as our work lives continue to change in different ways, just want to make sure that we're all sort of conscious of what's going on. So I will hand it off to Claudia and Sterling. Oh, actually, no, it's my slide. I apologize. I got one more here. So just a couple of quick hitter items, right? We do post this, so there's a link to where we post all of our stakeholder meeting updates. So whether it's this sort of normally scheduled process conversation, the simplified one that we're going to talk about, like I said, in the next couple of months, or various other sort of impromptu webinar type meetings, we post them all onto that same page, so the link will be there first. Another one that we continue to see issues with, right? As more and more sites continue to interconnect to our system, right? Stuff happens after they're interconnected, right? They're sold, they're moved for different reasons, right? And the transfer of ownership is incredibly important for us to be able to maintain an understanding of who the right contact people are, right? So whether it's for outage reasons, whether it's just we have to contact or to make sure stuff is going to the right place, and that transfer of ownership is important for us to maintain. And we just don't know about it unless we're being told. So it really does put the onus back on the DG industry, both the seller and the buyer. Someone should be reaching out to us and letting us know so we can get the correct paperwork and make sure that we're able to talk about those projects, right, with the proper people as we move forward. So if you've been following some of the regulatory stuff that's been going on in 2548, a lot of good successes there, right? We were able to, with the DG industry and the EDCs, we're able to submit some consensus items for review and approval by the DPU. One of those was something called group study exempt, a big process for projects 250 and below. Probably the biggest impact is to National Grid, right? Just the type of work that we see coming into our queue and in our current processes. But ultimately, it's looking for a way to find 250 and below projects a little bit quicker path to interconnection. Not impacted by ASO and different rules. So we're waiting for the last couple of approval steps from the DPU, and then we'll be looking to roll that out. With that, we are planning on having another webinar. Right now, it's looking like the second week of May, right, to kind of talk through what that process is, what to expect, and a little bit of our sort of decision-making process, and we'll look at each one of those projects to kind of work it through to figure out if it is going to be able or eligible for group study exempt. So just keep an eye out for that webinar invite. Will probably be coming out as we get into the first week of May, and then we'll get something on the calendar for that second week, right? It'll probably be like a Tuesday or Wednesday is kind of what we're targeting right now. And then further successes, right, around the last 12-month period. So National Grid's fiscal year is April to March, right? So I do track a number of our targets and milestones within this 12-month period. So just to kind of report out on what we've been able to interconnect. So we've done almost 11,500 applications. That totals about 157 megawatts. So what we've seen in our queue, right, is that simplified projects are bigger than they used to be, and complex projects are smaller than they used to be. So you can see how those numbers in the next two bullets, right, 80 megawatts total for complex, and then for simplified 75 or 77 megawatts interconnected. So those numbers have pinched together closer and closer over time, and actually the number of applications from a complex standpoint is actually increased in order even to get that level of megawatts. So the volumes remain high. I think we all know the complexity, even for smaller size projects, continues to remain pretty high. But that's kind of the trends that we're seeing today and what happened over the last 12 months. But overall, 157 megawatts connected within that time. And as we all know, the last, we'll call it 9 months-ish, right, have been very interesting in our space as we continue to try to learn and figure out what the next few years are going to bring for us. But, we have still been able to move projects through, get them connected, and do what it is that we're all kind of setting out to do here. So success for both National Grid and for all of our DG partners as we move projects forward. So now I will hand it off to Claudia and Sterling to talk a little bit about the screening process, and we'll run through, and I'll come back at the end and we'll talk about Q&A. So just a reminder, any sort of Q&A, please submit it through that link, and we will follow up at the end of the meeting. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Will. Good morning, everyone. I hope you are all well. My name is Claudia. I'm a consultant here in the Customer Energy Integration Group. I will be covering today the initial part of the standard interconnection process, and we'll be talking initially about pre-applications. Pre-applications are required for any proposed system 250 kW or greater, and the required fees are as listed in this table. So for project size less than 250 kW, the pre-application report fee required to be paid by developers is $100. For projects between 250 kW and 500 kW, $250, and for projects above 500 kW, $750. So when submitting a pre-applications, we require 4 essential pieces of information to be provided by developers so that we can draft these reports. These are, for example, the location, site, address, but also GPS coordinates, so that we have the exact location of the interconnecting facility, the aggregate system size, the generation type, is it solar, CHP, BESS, wind, or is it hydro project? Or is it both solar and BESS? What type of project is it? And also an uploaded screenshot using any web mapping platform like Google Maps, Google Earth, Bing Maps, the Massachusetts Assessors Maps. Preferably also adding property boundary lines so that we know which territory is it. Additionally, once this information is provided by the developers, National Grid will be drafting and completing these reports within 10 business days. And we have multiple resources for developers and customers to look at and use when determining where to apply for new interconnections, including the heat map and hosting capacity map, which also includes the information about group study. So if there is a group study currently ongoing in the area, and the pre-application reports provide much of the useful information across all those resources while providing much more up-to-date knowledge of internal information, feeder configuration, substation challenges, and other items that aren't publicly available. Next slide, please. So here we have a snapshot of the pre-application report that is provided by National Grid. So the first page is where we find the circuit feeder information for the proposed system. This contains information that we just spoke about earlier. The second page details additional notes about the distribution system in the area. These are notes that can include any ongoing ASO study in the area, potential system constraints or challenges that the interconnection could face, if a distribution impact study or transmission system impact study would be required for this specific project, depending on the system size exactly, and if the proposed project is located in a group study area, and also if there is maybe an ASO currently going on. So this information is provided so that we can assist customers and developers to determine if they would like to progress the application to the application stage, which is basically the next phase after the pre-application, so the next stage. The next few pages of the pre-application report have also links to our interconnection documents and processes, our standards for interconnecting distributed generation, electrical installation standards, ESBs, etc., etc. And the last few pages also contain the detailed application review checklist. So this snapshot also, is a very good information that is provided. Next slide, please. So once the pre-application report has been delivered and reviewed by developers' customers, we also find this application checklist. This checklist is currently being updated to be even more detailed, but however, it details where in the tariff or standards or ESBs you can find additional details for the required documents for the application phase. It is very important to follow these requirements so that additional holds are avoided and hence delays, right, to going from application phase to the screening phase. And so the project can move forward in a smooth way. In this checklist, all required documents for application review are outlined. And that is pretty much it. Please, next slide. Thank you so much. So, as mentioned, once a pre-application has been accepted by the developer, the customer developer can provide the required documents and submit an application following the application checklist that we saw earlier. Interconnection applications are required for all projects. And currently, we require all items on application to be provided, and we have 10 business days, excluding holes that may come up because maybe there is something missing, but National Grid has 10 business days to complete these applications. Currently, for complex projects, we have a couple of portal updates, but we are going through them, and so all submissions require a complete application form, application fee, billing account number, construction work request number, system size exact to match, right, on both the all documents like the legal application form and on the portal, equipment access, account location, site plan, line diagram, site control documentation, text sheet, and legal information document. Large projects could also require additional forms such as curtailment or derating letters, anti-aliasing form, UL 1741 SB certificate, and the project that also contain storage or are maybe PV plus storage or only storage also require the energy storage narrative and energy storage checklist. So that is it for this slide. Please, let's go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So in this slide, we have outlined some of the most common issues that we have seen as the screening team reviewing these applications. So most missed items are, for example, document discrepancies. For example, we have an address that is not matching in application, site plan, line diagram, legal information document. So document discrepancies, billing account number that is missing or that is not completely 9 digits, construction work request number that has not maybe been requested or is missing, UL 1741 SB certificate that is required for all projects above 100 kW, anti-aliasing forms onto the most up-to-date forms. So in the interconnection documents website, National Grid has outlined all forms in most up-to-date forms. And so those needs to be used, not like all forms. And anti-aliasing forms are required for all projects 250 or above. Derating or curtailment letters in the case where we have the project is being reduced in size, export size. Line diagram omissions include inverter, interconnecting device nameplate rating, relay settings, table missing, make model voltage, for example, of the inverter that is not being shown in the line diagram, current rating, internal DG protective settings with redundant relay settings for inverters. So the tables for both inverters and relay are needed to be shown. Missing electrical engineering P stamp, or also sometimes we have the electrical P stamp, but we don't have the date. So the date is needed. Aggregate AC, KW, KVA ratings for entire proposed system. While on the other side, for site plans, mistakes or omissions, we have missing PCC, so point of common coupling, POI. We have maybe notes about the access road that needs to be 20 feet so that enough clearance is provided. Company pool number nearest to the proposed PCC, and all equipment will be required to be grouped. So the note needs to be there about ESB 750 and ESB 756 about metering and interrupting devices such as disconnects needs to be there, that note. Next slide, please. So in this slide, we also find further application review guidelines related to that are related to ESB 756, which is basically the utility bulletin for requirements for parallel generation connected to a utility-owned electric power system (EPS), which basically just in short terms provide further guidance to developers submitting complex applications in national grid territories. So National Grid will not be providing transformers larger than 300 kVA or when primary metering is least cost to serve option. All commercial meters and disconnects need to be grouped together. Existing meter located on a pad-mounted transformer would be required to be relocated when applying for a new standalone DG system. New MA smart meter installations require disconnecting means on both the line and load side of the meter. A new MA smart systems over 500 kW must be located with the energy storage system ESS that meets the requirements for energy storage system adder. AC couple projects require individual meters for the solar ESS and a utility meter ahead of the entire system. All final metering locations will be determined by the metering department and will be based on existing service configurations. All expedited cases that need further study will need all the documentations required for standard projects. And final disconnect and meter location should not be installed until National Grid has approved the location. So National Grid will be reviewing and then finalizing the location for this with a licensed electrician. So these are just guidelines to be on the lookout for so that delays are prevented. Once an application is complete, the next phase is the screening, and screening is required for all standard projects. I'll now let my colleague, Senior Screening Consultant Sterling Ortiz, take over. Thank you everyone for your attention. I know it was a lot of information, and thank you, Sterling.
Thank you, Claudia. Good morning, everyone. My name is Sterling Ortiz, part of the Customer Energy Integration team here at National Grid. All the applications essentially go through this team, and we're more than happy to be able to process these applications for you. Once the application goes through, the application review is deemed completed and the project is progressing to screening, and screening is obviously required for all standard projects. Projects larger than 250 kW that are going to require further study takes a detailed look at the proposed system at an injection point for the system configuration and area infrastructure to provide corrections and feedback to developers before progressing projects for further study, for example, an impact study. During screening review, we also check if the project is on a radial or network system, if the equipment is UL 1741 SB listed, and thus the proposed DG on the system pass substation backfeed and island in screening. If any of the screening checkpoint fails, National Grid may require further study before providing the connection service agreement. Other reasons a project under 250 kW could require further study are proposed interconnection in an area with an ongoing group study, um, where any proposed project 25 kW or larger would be required to go through the group study process, which will be detailed a little bit later on this webinar. Most 4 kV interconnections require further study, and every proposed project on a network or non-effectively grounded system will require further study. Next slide, please. Some of the potential system constraints that lead to further study are listed on this slide. An ongoing area study or group studies, as mentioned before, challenging feeders, hosting capacity, feeder reconfiguration, ungrounded feeders, non-effectively grounded feeders, high tension lines, plant substation work, and feeder saturation are some of the challenges within National Grid. Next slide, please. This next four slides are screenshots of a finalized screening memo report that is created as part of the DG process and going through screening. We're currently working on updating this format. So if you see a change from this, will certainly be a new updated report. The first page is laid out in 3 sections, with the top section showing the proposed project and site information. The second section will detail whether the project will require further study or not. If the project does not require further study, it could progress to conditional approval or supplemental review. If the project requires further study and is progressing outside of a group study, this section will include an estimate for a system distribution impact study. The third section outlines the feeder information, substation information, and total amount of proposed and interconnected distributed generation on that feeder and substation. Next slide, please. The second page of the screening memo details the specific project configuration and proposed equipment that will be provided by the utility and interconnecting customer. It also includes general site requirements and any additional requirements that could be requested as the project progresses to the standard process. All of the notes in this section will vary depending on the project type and size and configuration. The final section of this page provides the screener review notes outlining how the proposed project will progress and including some impact study, group study information as far as the screening results. Next slide, please. This third page of the screening memo lists the proposed generating equipment that the system intends to utilize. And below that are also the general requirements stating all systems need to utilize UL 1741 certified generation equipment and will need to comply with the interconnection tariff and national grid electrical standards books. The only exception to the required UL 1741 SP certifications would be gas-powered turbines or fuel cell projects. Next slide, please. The last page of the screening memo contains the links to the MADG website, National Grid Electrical Specifications and Standards website, and the National Grid Stakeholders Information website, where you can find these slides, upcoming meetings, and additional study information. After this last page of the screening memo, the approved site plan and one-line diagram for this project get attached as part of the entire compiled report. This then gets uploaded to the portal and an email is sent to the application owner with this finalized report. Once the screening process is finalized, we progress this to the expedited team for conditional approval or supplemental review. If further study is required, this project passes to the complex team to progress this through the standard path. And that's all we have for the pre-app application and screening process. I will now hand this off to Jesse Rosa. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jessie Rosa. I am a senior project coordinator under Will here at CEI, and I'll be going over our standard and complex process to interconnect individual and group study projects. Next slide, please. This is the interconnection process step slide. After the project progresses through screening, a determination of which study path it will take forward is made, which will be provided from the engineering team. The study results will conclude any risk or impacts for the project. Once the study is completed, the customer will receive an impact study report for their review and acceptance. If both parties are in agreement and there are no additional hold items or concerns, then the job owner will draft the Interconnection Service Agreement, or ISA. After the ISA is fully executed, the project will continue through the following steps and process. It goes through design, construction, witness test efforts, meter installation, registration of assets, and closing out with the authorization to interconnect, or ATI. Next slide, please. Here we have the study review path for independent applications. There are two initial options for how your project will be studied, and this is dependent on specific criteria, including the size of your project and the area it is located. It will either be studied individually or through a group study. A mutual agreement can be like a standalone battery study, and we'll talk more about that later. The next two slides will show the timelines for those paths. For the standard independent application, the maximum number of days allowed to complete the efforts, not including holds, would be 200 business days. Something to be mindful of is the construction schedules as it varies and it's established on a case-by-case basis. Otherwise, the rest of the timeline stays the same. Next slide, please. Here we have the group study timeline. So the group study timeline is similar to the individual study process. The only difference would be the 100, 125, or 160 business day milestones. These timeframes are based on how many applications are submitted in a group study area, what the total aggregate nameplate capacity is equal to, and if the system modifications are more or less than 1.5 million. Next slide, please. The other factors that would extend these timelines would be if the project or group needs to go through an ASO study, which we will get more into that in a few slides. After the completion of the study milestones, the remaining part of the process is the same as standard, including drafting of the ISA, delivery, and execution. Next slide, please. Here we have the group study summary. This slide summarizes the summary in the slide deck are not all inclusive of every tariff requirement applicable to a group study. So to make sure that you're clicking the links provided here to familiarize yourself with the responsibility and task requirement. Next slide, please. Here we have some group study references. The group study website link has been updated and provided here. Make sure to check the monthly group study status report. This will give the most up-to-date status for each ongoing group study and bring visibility to expected timelines for certain milestones. The group study status map is another helpful tool to see when group study windows are open and closed. Next slide, please. Here we'll go through ESS timelines. On this slide, we're going over if your project has an energy storage system or, as I mentioned, ESS. During the screening process where the substation and EPS components are identified, the proposed operational information for the ESS is collected through the ESS narrative and the ESS questionnaire. This includes standalone systems and projects with co-located systems. The study timeframe will be affected based on the customer's desired operational mode. A mutually agreed upon timeline will be chosen if the ESS operates on a scheduled or unscheduled manner. If the ESS performs on a single mode of operation, then it will progress through the typical 55 business day path. The company will provide the customer with a preliminary assessment detailing system capacity and potential EPS modifications to interconnect the ESS. Once delivered, the customer must respond within 10 business days to notify the company how they wish to proceed forward. If we do not receive a response within that time frame, then the project will be studied in the mode of full nameplate capacity in an unscheduled operation in the 55 business day period. Design changes are subject to DG tariff policy for moderate or significant changes. The company determines whether the change request is moderate or significant on a case-by-case basis. Next slide, please. Here we'll go over some common errors or things to keep in mind while going through the study and ISA stages of this process. There are specific common errors listed here, but the general idea is to ensure that all of your documents are accurate and up to date. Often there will be changes made with the customer, legal entity, retail customer, or landowner, so make sure that when those changes occur to update the information on the legal document and notify your job owner. Another important note that we see, or another important error that we see on here is the P stamps for the one lines. Make sure that the stamp follows the criteria requirements. So, for example, symbol or image in the form of a rubber stamp, seal, or digitalized seal. It must contain the words Commonwealth of Massachusetts. It must contain the words professional engineer and have their name and registration number. It must be signed and dated with legible handwritten signature adjacent to the seal or properly encrypted digital signature. When a digital signature is applied, it must have an electronic authentication document attached to it that is uniquely associated with the professional engineer and linked to the specific document in a manner that will invalidate the digital signature if any part of the document is changed. And lastly, the stamp should not be able to be copied or moved and are not allowed to be used by another person. Remember that catching and addressing these errors are both the customer's responsibility as well as the job owners, but finding these issues subjects the project to be placed on hold. The project will not progress forward until these items are addressed and approved. If the items are not addressed and approved by the end of the whole due date, the project is subject to withdrawal. Next slide, please. Additionally, here we have some issues that we have found with completion documents. The big focus again here being that all documents are submitted correctly to provide essential benefits to the customer. So for example, if your project is greater than 60 kW, make sure to have all your qualifying facility documents, including the W-9, ACH, supplier enrollment form, and asset registration. These items are needed so the company can register the facility with ISO New England to be compensated in the administered wholesale electricity market at an hourly real-time clearing price. Next slide, please. Here we'll take a look at some standard review path reminders. This slide emphasizes the importance and reason for the project to be studied and that it is to understand its impact on the area it's proposed to interconnect to and what system modifications need to be in place for that to happen. One of the items on this list that I believe is most important is the second bullet here. All projects greater than 1 megawatt will require ISO New England 1.3.9 submission for the ISO New England approval, regardless of whether an ASO study is required. This submission will take place within the distributed system impact study. Once submitted, the project will be placed on an ASO hold until the ISO New England provides approval and or the ASO study is complete. This is for projects that are studied individually and in a group study. And we'll go further into detail on the ASO studies later on in a few slides. Next slide, please. Here is a metering reminder slide. All meter and metering requirements are detailed in the Electrical System Bulletin, or ESB, under these specifications for electrical installations. It's the section that states metering, but you can always reach out to your job owner in advance for any questions regarding metering, since they can have a long lead time and prep time. It is important to have these discussions ahead of time before reaching the point of authorization to interconnect or ATI. Some important listed here are: in Massachusetts, it's required to install an interval meter for projects that are greater than 60 kW. These meters have to be wireless or on a phone line. If they are wireless, then it's required to run a 4G wireless signal test on a Verizon network. There is a link at the bottom of the page or of the slide that you can take, that you'll be able to find the test form. If the meter is on a phone line, then it must be dedicated and terminated at the meter location. The line must be 100% copper with no exceptions. And if you use fiber lines, it could be not communicate properly. So just keep that in mind. Thank you. I won't, this is the witness test and completion document reminders. We're not going to go through all the bullets on the slide. These slides will be provided to you, so you could always go back. But we have a link here for the most recent checklist updated on the NCAP portal. As you're going through these lists, you can reach out to your job owner with any questions or comments if anything doesn't make sense or if you need clarification. Make sure the witness test checklist includes pictures of the generator, nameplate capacity. Remember that all of the checklist requirements must be approved by National Grid, and all customer construction must be completed before scheduling a witness test. With regard to the compliance and assessment registration, National Grid will manage the registration process with ISO New England unless the customer desires otherwise. This is for when the project is not participating in SMART or establishing the generator as a qualified facility, but intends to participate in the New England wholesale electricity market administered by ISO New England. Next slide, please. This next slide talks regarding document revisions and restudy reminders. For projects that want to submit a change either before or after a study is completed, you will need to fill out a change request form, which can be found on the Interconnection Documents website. And there's also a link here on this page, on this slide. If you are making changes after a study is complete, the customer needs to inform National Grid of those changes by clicking the change request button on the portal and provide updating supporting documents, including one-line site plans, tech sheets, etc. For one-line and site plans that do not show these changes, ensure they are for one-lines and site plans that do show these changes, ensure they are clouded and the revision block is signed, dated, and shows updated revision number. Another good reminder is that restudies can cause impacts to projects' cost and timelines, even if the scope of work doesn't change. Please refer to the moderate significant change guidance prior to submitting your change. And lastly, if the ISA has been fully executed, National Grid's design construction process may be put on hold for the duration of the restudy and until an ISA amendment has been fully executed. This will be determined by the company, and a re-evaluation of the construction schedule may be necessary and will be determined during the restudy. Next slide, please. On this slide, we have important target dates for interconnecting by end of year. Try to obtain end of year interconnection. To try to obtain end of year interconnection, you want to submit by October 1st the witness test documents and the wireless meter test form. Also by November 13, you would want to have all DG facility construction and inspections complete and submit all outstanding documents for the company to review. Next slide, please. The most important part of this slide is that the meeting these target dates does not guarantee end of year interconnection for your facility. However, it does give National Grid a better opportunity to meet your request. These target dates have been established based on the company's experience and delays to end of year processing. The interconnecting customers' planning and cooperation is essential to this process. Please keep in mind that authorization to interconnect will not be issued until the interconnecting customer has satisfied all interconnection requirements, including but without limitation to the wiring inspector, all compliance documentation, the witness test, ISO New England registration, and the required meter is installed. There is a link at the bottom of the slide for additional information and resources, or you can always reach out to your job owner for assistance. Next slide, please. Now we're going to go into the fulfillment of the ISO New England's 1.3.9 requirements. Next slide, please. So either of these models and payments will be required based on the size of the system. It could be the PSCAD or PSSE model. For all systems over 1 megawatt, a PSCAD model and model review payment is required. And for all systems 5 megawatts and above, you will need a PSSE model and model review payment, regardless of ASO study requirements. For all proposed projects greater than 1 megawatt that are required to receive ISO New England 1.3.9 approval of either a GNF, which is a generator notification form, or a PPA, which is a proposed plan application. An ASO study may be needed before this requirement. Next slide, please. The process for providing approved PSCAD, PSSE models is the following. With the initial model request, the most important thing to remember is that the models will not be reviewed until the payment has been received. Once the payment is received, it will cover the cost for up to 3 attempts. After the 3rd attempt, if there are still deficiencies, then the customer will need to submit additional payment for further model review. The initial request for required models and model review payment must be submitted within 30 business days. Keep in mind that it is unlikely that a model will be approved after the first attempt or initial submission, so getting the models in as soon as possible will only help you hold more time for those additional attempts. And finally, failure to provide an approved model by the model approval due date will result in the project being subject to withdrawal from the queue and must reapply if planning to proceed. Next slide, please. The process for receiving ISO New England 1.3.9 approval. The first 3 bullets are mentioning when an ASO study is needed and when projects require ISO New England approval. Then the table below is showing a timeline of when to request ISO New England ASO study determination. In order to receive ISO New England ASO study determination, a project or group study must have confirmed transmission injection points and all required models must be approved. A project's draft system interconnection study will be placed on hold for ASO purposes when transmission injection points are identified from engineering. Customers with models outstanding or models that are not fully approved by the date transmission injection points are identified will be subject to withdrawal from the interconnection queue and must reapply if planning to move forward. Next slide, please. Here we are continuing receiving approval. Some additional information in the event that an ASO study is not required. If it is not required, then the project will be presented as a GNF, the generator notification form, at the next monthly any pool RC meeting to get approval. This takes about 1 to 3 weeks after the meeting to get an approval letter. If the project is not part of a group study, then it will resume once the approval letter is received. And if the project is part of a group study, then it will stay on hold until all members of the group with projects greater than 1 megawatt receive an approval letter. Next slide, please. Continuing on with receiving ISO New England approval. A few additional reminders on this slide. All projects that are 5 megawatts or greater will automatically require a comprehensive ASO study. This level of study is the longest. It takes about 12 to 18 months to complete. The next slide will show the timeline for the other 2 levels of studies as well. And then for pre-ASO study commencement, we have the steps listed here. But the big item to keep in mind is that prior to an ASO study being able to start, all other ongoing ASO studies and or FERC studies within the same electrical area must be completed. Finally, once all ASO study payments have been received, then the study can officially begin. Next slide, please. Continuing on here, this slide shows the timeline for each study level to be completed, and then the link below is a useful tool to show ASO study updates. These updates are published monthly, so make sure to check those for your records. Next slide, please. These 3 bullets are reiterating what happens after the completion of an ASO study. If the project is presented as a PPA or GNF, it will need RC approval. If the project is not part of a group study, it will need RC approval. If the project is part of a group study, it will stay on hold until all projects receive RC approvals. Next slide, please. Here we'll go over project changes after ISO New England 1.3.9 approval letter is received. If the project changes are made after the approval letter is received, it would trigger the following. The table shows examples of what would happen depending on what type of project change is requested. It won't go through the whole, I'm not going to go through the whole table, but as you can see, most of the changes will trigger either a revised ASO study, a revised GNF or PPA submission, or a new PS-CAD, PSSE model, and model review payments. And my last slide here are your ASO references, some reports and resources. This is a great slide to refer back to, but as always, you can reach out to your job owner with any questions or concerns you might have. Lastly, before moving on to the next section, I do want to provide everyone with the latest update on the FERC. Oh, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm sorry. I apologize. I needed to remove that from my notes. And so there is more information available directly on the ISO New England website as well. And next slide, please. Now I'm going to hand this off to Alex, who will speak on post interconnection and incentive program support. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. Hi, everyone. My name is Alex. I'm a regulatory specialist with CEI, and today I'm going to talk about post connection and incentive program and other support that our team will offer. All right, so we can go to the next slide. All right, so connected customer requests. We'd love to hear from you if you have questions, comments, concerns. And so anyone that is, a stakeholder involved in the interconnection of a DG site is able to submit a connected customer request. We will need certain documentation if we're looking to change certain like names on cases or anything. But there's definitely a lot of ways or a lot of different questions you can ask us that we'll try to route to the correct people. So if you have questions regarding billing for your DG site or credit allocations, if you're allocating net metering or smart AOBC facility, transfer of ownership is another really important one. If the system is changing hands, we do need to have the proper documentation for that. Other things regarding power quality, voltages, metering, if you're looking to change your credit allocations, or again, just other updates that you need onto your case that are related to your facility. We can shift to the next slide to talk more about how to actually go ahead and submit these inquiries. So the first step here is going to be going to our Grid4 site. This is where we have all of these links as well as a handful of helpful articles, but we tried to make these buttons as big and clear as possible. So when you're here, you're going to want to hit the Contact Us button, and that's going to route you directly to be able to start a DG inquiry. And then we can shift to the next slide. If you're looking to submit a new allocation form, either for a net metering or smart AOBC facility, or submit your first allocation form, we recommend first clicking down here that post interconnection button, and then we can go on to the next slide. And once you're here in the DG post interconnection, you're going to want to go to Massachusetts. You can either click the nice little picture we have there of Boston, or you can click the words Massachusetts post interconnection. In either case, it's going to route you to the same information. It's going to have a lot of different knowledge articles and sites, and the Massachusetts credit allocation change request is the one that will go through the process of what's needed to submit the allocation sheet, and sort of what's expected of you and how it'll be processed. We can move to the next slide to talk a little bit more about allocations. So for both net metering and smart AOBC customers, you're allowed to submit up to 6 credit allocation changes per year. This is so that, again, it takes, one billing cycle to get them to apply. So this gives us enough time to make sure the allocations are all going to active and valid accounts. Under both our smart provision, which is MDPU 1625, as well as our net metering provision, MDPU 1622, National Grid will carry forward any remaining credit balance on a customer's account. So if anything ends up unallocated, it will stay on that host account. The exception to this is for smart AOBC facilities, as well as the net metering cap-exempt facilities serving on-site load, aka CEFSOLs. They have an opportunity at the end of each fiscal year to cash out their excess balance. The treatment for both of those is a little different. We are just about to enter our cash out period. So if you fall into one of these two buckets, you'll likely be receiving communications from us in the next few weeks regarding your balance and what you can do with it and how you are eligible. This is the same for both host customers and recipients. Recipients do not have the option to cash out, but any unused credit balance will continue to remain on their account until it's utilized and offset by the load. If a recipient account that is on an allocation sheet closes before the credits are generated, that allocated percentage will remain on that host customer's account. So again, it's important to try to keep those allocations up to date and submit new allocations when able, when you know that there are accounts finaling or going inactive. And we can go on to the next slide. So there's a lot of information here. I won't try to, go too in depth with it. But if you're a net metering facility and you're a large net metering facility, so a complex, or you're a smart facility that is also net metering, you'll need to submit both the Schedule Z form as well as the Schedule Z Excel. This is so that we have both documents on hand. And in that Excel document, make sure to only enter into the blank fields that are specified. These sheets are put through an automation system, and any sort of edits or adjustments to any part of that sheet will potentially cause issues with the automation. If you are closing your account and you are either a host or recipient, so either hosting the DG facility or recipient of credits, you are able to transfer those credits via a one-time transfer. Again, this is just for those closing accounts. But if you're doing just one account, we have one form for that. And if you're going to multiple accounts, we have a separate form to allocate those credits out to multiple recipients. Credits that are generated by facilities that do not qualify as new solar or as cap exempt serving on-site load and our net metering provision, these credits can only be transferred to accounts in the same load zone. So just pay attention to that. If you're not qualified as either new solar or as a CEF-SOL, you will need to remain, those credits have to remain in the load zone. But if you are new solar and CEF-SOL, then you have a lot more opportunities to transfer these credits to any load zone and any EDC. So they can also go between Eversource and Unitil. Accumulated credits on a satellite account can only be transferred when the account is in a final status. So if you're a recipient and you have an excess credit balance, your only opportunity to transfer those would be if the account is closing. And again, just to reiterate, one-time transfers are not otherwise not allowed under the current net metering regulations. For Smart AOBC, it's a little bit more flexible. In similar fashion, you'll submit the AOBC allocation worksheet, which is essentially a Schedule Z, but for Smart. And AOBC hosts also have the opportunity to transfer credits via a one-time transfer up to 4 times per calendar year. But this is not to replace allocating credits. So you still are required to submit an AOBC allocation sheet, even if you also plan on taking advantage of one of those 4 OTT opportunities. And then we can go on to the next slide. So now just shifting gears in the same vein of DG facilities. If you're making physical changes to a already connected project, you need to submit a DG inquiry via the Contact Us button, which we went over earlier. This case will be reviewed and then routed to an account manager who will be able to inform you more what's needed for your specific facility. This is either going to take place in the portal, so on that case, either on that original case that you have for the facility or a new one that the account manager creates. But this, again, submitting the inquiry is the first step, but only non-significant changes will be able to be handled just through like a quick DG inquiry. If it's a significant change, we will end up requiring a new application. So some examples of a non-significant change are inverter updates, replacements, whereas a significant change would be something like adding batteries. And so that would require a new application case. But again, if you're unsure, just submit the DG inquiry and we will help out and figure out sort of what level the change is and what's required of you. The age of a project and the nature of the ask will drive the cost and the timeline. So if it requires any studying or additional review from engineering, if it requires witness testing, that can extend the timeline and increase cost depending on, again, what the level of the change is. However, we do want to reiterate, please do not make changes to connected projects without informing National Grid. This can invalidate the ISA, which can force your project to be disconnected. So if there's changes that are being made, please just inform us, again, whether it's significant or non-significant. We do need to have it documented in case it requires an updated ISA. And then we can move on to the next slide here. And just a few other quick reminders for our interconnected customers. We do require emergency contact information for all hosts or owners of DG facilities. If there's outages or something else we need to get in contact with, it's really important that we have the most up-to-date emergency contact information. So if the project is changing hands, if this is a management company and the roles are changing, please make sure to submit a DG inquiry and inform us of these changes. That way we have the most up-to-date information. Additionally, my business account is available for commercial customer billing. The link is there, which will be available once this slideshow is shared widely with the audience. But again, if you are a commercial customer, we definitely recommend exploring this option. It definitely helps streamline a lot of the sort of billing and allocation process to sort of make sure that we're all moving expeditiously. And then lastly, we always recommend checking out our Solar Hub. We keep it very updated and we provide a lot of different documentation and resources that can be helpful for both residential and complex customers. And then we can move on to the next slide. And lastly, this is just a series of different resources that I recommend going through once you're interconnected. Again, this slideshow will be shared with the audience and definitely worth checking out these different links. We keep them very updated and continue to review them on a regular basis. But with that, I am now going to pass it off to Kara, who will talk more about the portal.
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Kara Nail, and I am a Salesforce product owner for the DG portal. Next slide, please. All right, so I'm going to share some information. We're doing a little bit of changes for the post-interconnection challenges that they've been having, a little bit similar to what Alex was talking about. So right now, the post-interconnection team faces time and efficiency challenges when they're reviewing solar accounts tied to single addresses. And that has caused, some confusion with multiple applications. We end up having to do manual lookups, which creates a data risk. And it just creates probably an impact for our developers and our customers significantly as well. So it's not great. Next slide, please. So working with the post-interconnection team and the applications team, we came up with some new descriptions. And so we are going to try and address this right at the system intent capture at the point of application. So when you're filling in the application going forward, you're going to see these new options so that we can better make sure that we understand exactly what's going on with your application, if there's any type of existing system, or if you're expanding a system, maybe you're terminating your system or you're just replacing some equipment. We need to make sure that we understand what's going on and that we've provided you the right information to give us that. So that's what these changes are all about. Next slide. So I am going to hand it off to Arnaldo.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Kara, for kicking me off. So if you can go to the next page. So yes, Arnaldo Arnal, I am coming today to introduce what we call our new flexible interconnections offering. For those that are new to this, flexible connection is a new opportunity that can enable our customers to interconnect more quickly and at lower cost. How this basically works is for some specific customers, we will be able, FlexIX will be able to leverage the addition of a dispatch control function to enroll DR assets. What this means, basically, we will place a dimmer switch like the one on the page over here, which will allow us to send curtailment signals to your asset whenever we need to reduce the export or reduce the import from load or generation from your side. And as a good dimmer switch, it will also have an on-off switch in case of non-compliance. If there's ever loss of comms for any given reason, we will be able to still shut you off in case we have any issues, so we don't basically break the grid. Now you may asking what does this mean? You can look at the graph on the right. Usually how we study assets throughout the year, it's tied to a fixed hosting capacity. And what's interesting is that that hosting capacity limit is hit just a few times peak days of the year. But any other given day, most likely there's enough capacity to add more generation or more storage. So this basically says is we will be adding a dynamic line, a dynamic reader, basically, that will assess how much capacity is on that specific feeder at any given point in order to maximize the output from your specific asset. So if we go to the next slide, we'll talk high level about the offerings, and then I'll go in and do a double click into how would this specifically look like. So if you can go to next slide. So right now we're looking at 5 potential use cases. Most likely this will change. We will add more. We'll delete these as different customer needs appear. I'll start with the first one in blue. This is what we call Flex Standard and Flex as a bridge. The first one over here is very much aligned to what I was just mentioning before. It's the description for flexible interconnection. It will be for both solar storage and solar and storage together. Ideally, for those cases that you have solar and storage together, and it could be for standalone and behind the meter. So it can be serving load behind the meter, and it could be between 500 kW all the way to 5 megawatt. And for the example that I mentioned, we will provide you in your flexible interconnection contract a 5% non-curtailment megawatt hour that we will say, like, throughout the year, 5% megawatt hours will be curtailed, and ideally you will do the modeling and make sure that works for you. And now this, as mentioned, resolves that one major constraint, which is that feeder, right? It's not solving for others, and which you will still be studied for the other potential issues. And in here, we'll be adding that monitoring control and trip reclosure for non-compliance, as mentioned. The next one, as the name calls it, Flex is a bridge. It is a bridge, and this one is primarily use cases for those that are intended for large DRs that are seeking to interconnect during significant upgrade periods. Let's say you're looking to have the interconnection, but the interconnection, you're looking for a firm interconnection, but a flexible interconnection is the quickest way to get you online. You can use flexible interconnection, Flex as a bridge, as that bridge in order to be either fully firm or less or more flexible, or less flexible as we go. So those are the two that are kind of barely aligned to what I was explaining before. The next three are another type of technology, which it's basically a local power controller that we will add to that site. In the 3 cases, it will be non-export. So this works specifically for smaller sites. They're looking to use the entire generation behind the meter. The first one over here, LPC Lite, it is specifically for solar, as mentioned, behind the meter assets that are below 250 kW, 250 kW and below. And as mentioned, will be not exporting, no monitoring, no control, no compliance. And you can add load, but it's not a requirement. And the specific one of these will be for pre-identified substations. We're working with our engineers to identify those substations to make sure we can be ready to get those applications. So we will be providing additional information on these and which are the substations that will be accepting these types of projects soon. And our teams, the screener team within CEI, will be doing the screening for these projects. The other two are a little bit more flexible, but have a little bit more of a constraint. The specificity of this is that you would need to be adding a battery or solar and storage, but you also need to be adding load. And that is where that load and that new generation is equal or less than the load that you're adding. Therefore, you will never be exporting anything into the grid. You will be always consuming it behind the meter. So we got 2 options. One is 250 kW and less, or the other one is 250 kW to up to 500 kW. And these one will be across the jurisdiction, not specifically tied to specific substations. I'm assuming there's still lots of questions. I'll go to the next slide, and hopefully we'll have time to answer some questions. So just to give you an idea of what this looks like. Let's say you got a 5 megawatt battery, you want to get interconnected. Ideally, everything goes great. You get studied, there's no issues, and you go through the standard interconnection process. Many cases, you have issues. So you can either reduce proposed capacity, withdraw, find another location. If you're serving load, that's going to be very hard. Or you can pay for those upgrade costs, which can be very expensive, as we know it. Now, this new opportunity, Flex IX, can give you another option, which is, as mentioned, leveraging this specific monitoring at the feeder that can allow you to operate your site at a maximum capacity without having to wait for the upgrades and having to do those, spend that money for that upgrade. That's high level what it would be, and it's kind of similar process to the next for local power control. If you can jump to the next slide. fact, we can actually skip this one. It's basically the same thing. This one for LPC Light, LPC, and LPC Plus is specifically for example, a 400 kW rooftop solar. You're stuck in the queue. There's congestion. There's group studies. Ideally, we can get you moving forward faster through this opportunity. So with that, I'll jump to the last slide. What is the value proposition for Flex? Flex IX. So basically, as we talked about it, it's faster interconnection times, lower system upgrade costs, which I hope that it is something that all of you developers are very interested in. But also for the Commonwealth and for us utility, we're increasing network utilization, increasing overall grid visibility and control, and getting more renewable generation, growing renewable generation, and hitting our Commonwealth clean energy goals, and improving, as we talked about it, customer experience for developers. So hope that makes sense. Just to be clear, there's, as with always, there's some caveats to ensure that the system can operate safely and reliably. Only a set number of projects can participate in flexible interconnections at any given time. Right now, we are in the process of scaling, and we're not in the process of launching this offering, but at a measured scale up, right? We are not going to open the door for all flexible interconnections. We need to do it in a measured way to ensure that technology works, our grid operators can manage the new assets in a safely manner, and we can do this basically in a reliable way and an affordable way for everybody. So at the moment, we had a very successful pilot launch, and we were oversubscribed. So we're in the process, as you can imagine, waiting for those projects to get fully interconnected. And as we learn more about these projects, we'll be able to get more assets integrated. Hopefully, as well as once we get Derm's platform installed, we'll be able to get more assets interconnected flexibly. But the local power controller projects can start, we'll be able to start getting interconnected quickly soon. We are working to get in the platform the application process for flexible interconnections to be able to opt into flexible interconnections. So that new offering will be available in the platform within the next month or a little bit more. So stay tuned. We'll be sending out an email to everybody to let you know that you can now start submitting your applications for flexible interconnections. With that, I will pass it on to Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Arnoldo. Thank you for all the presenters. So we're going to jump into some Q&A here. Good chunk of questions, so I'll start working through them over the next 15 minutes or so, get through as many as we possibly can. We will post a frequently asked question type document in the same place that we'll post the slide deck and the recording of this presentation. So if we don't get to the question, or if the question doesn't specifically pertain to what it is that we've touched on today, right? So like any sort of simplified questions, those type of things, I'll move through and skip here just because of time and to make sure we're focused on complex space. So I'll jump right into these. A lot of questions. I'll group a few of them here. A lot of questions around sort of ASO, right? The TCS and what's going on. So I'll rapid fire through a few of these and then we'll move on to a different topic, right? But one of the questions is looking to see, it says results of the TCS from ISO New England are expected in August. How will that affect substations and new applications leading up to the October opening date for the next cluster study? I think we just don't really know as of yet how that's going to work. Or what the ultimate impacts are, right? I know from a distribution perspective, right, from a me perspective, we don't have a lot of visibility into the overall FERC queue and the FERC studies. We're only looking at sort of an ASO perspective. So as these cluster studies, as part of FERC 23, are going to move forward, right? Like we'll be learning, new characteristics of these transmission lines and obviously incorporating that into any of our future ASO studies. Talks about, here's a good question that I'll spend a minute on, right? Is the I think what we're expecting after these cluster studies are completed is sort of a resetting of, I'll call it capacity or space on some of these transmission lines, right? So will it be reset to zero? So essentially, what we've been working with, and why some projects get sort of a level 0 analysis as part of the determination from the ISO versus a level 3, where then an ASO study would be required, is that there is available capacity in certain electrically common areas, right? So those electrically common areas are not fully defined from an ISO perspective. They can and do change over time from that perspective. So it really is important that we do send the determination to the ISO in order to be able to get the feedback specifically to that site on that, interconnection point and that transmission line. So so that it's not something that we can entirely predict. Where those chunks exist and how much is on each one of those. But in theory, as these studies are completed, we are opening up additional capacity up to 20 megawatts, right? So there will be projects that can progress in certain areas that have that capacity that will only require a level 0 analysis. And then as we get to and approach that 20 megawatts, it could change, and then ASO studies would then be required. So the next question here is talking about the next cluster study. I apologize for my coughing. I'm a little bit under the weather the last few days. But the next study that's going to kick off right now, targeting early 2027. This one is expected to be longer, right? So the specified timeline for a cluster study is a little bit different than the transitional cluster study that we're currently is active right now. Right, and the question is, how long will it take National Grid to complete a group study after the cluster study is completed? I think these questions I get these questions all the time, and they're really, really difficult to answer because there's so many moving parts and things that just National Grid doesn't have control over, impacts within a group from one developer to another, right? Like there's too many things to ultimately be able to jump in and answer a question specifically about how long does this take. I think we have in the tariff documented timelines, right? And best case scenario sort of timelines. That's what we lean on pretty heavily. And then as those holds pop up, as those different situations pop up, it's just that timeline. Odds are it's never going to be shorter than what it is that we've stated or what it is that's expected. Our volume is too high. The complexity of what it is that we're dealing with is too high at this point. We are not beating or at least significantly beating any timelines that exist today. Another question here is just, would National Grid and the EDCs consider approaching the ISO with a concept of not requiring ASO study that includes a flex interconnection? Those conversations have happened, right, and are ongoing. Nothing has really changed there from that perspective. Right, there would still be an expectation on a flex project that is going to export or offset load, right, greater than 1 megawatt. We would still identify an injection point, bring that for a determination to the ISO, and then the ISO would get the opportunity to decide what level of analysis is required there. So other questions around ASO. How does the standard / complex DG interconnection process interact with the ISO New England cluster study process? So we don't technically interact throughout the majority of the process, right? So the ASO, how I understand it in my own head, is sort of the ASO study is happening under the umbrella. The timeline umbrella that cluster study, transitional cluster study, is happening from an ISO perspective. At the end of the cluster study, there's an output, and that is the final input into our ASO studies, just to make sure that we understand any of those impacts. And then that is sort of those last sort of study aspects take place with that final input, and then National Grid or any EDC would then take it to the RC meeting for final approval, right, based on whatever we found, and if there are system modifications identified, presenting those. So that's where the impact is, that the output of the cluster study is the final input into an ASO study. That's the touch point. And it says if a DG project does have to go through an ISO New England cluster study, how does that influence the overall timeline, right? So significantly at this point, right? We are expecting it to be, under a normal cluster study process, somewhere between a 15 to 18 month timeline overall, if an ASO study is required, right? Anything over one will have to go to will have to be submitted to the ISO for them to decide. But because of that, potential 20 megawatts of additional capacity, not everything will need an ASO study, but there is a significant timeline impact, right? It could be 18 to 24 months when it's all sort of the entirety of the process plays itself out. I think maybe the last one here, maybe I answered this one. It says, how will the TCS will inform the status of new projects and the determination as to whether new projects will require an ASO study? Again, that's not up to National Grid. So what we'll do is we'll perform the distribution portion of the study, identifying injection points, impedances, getting PSCAD models, collecting those, and then submitting that to the ISO for a determination at that time, and they will let us know. I'm going to take a breath here. There's a couple of, so Sterling and Claudia, I'm going to throw it over to you here for a couple of questions. The first one is why secondary protection with relay is required when the inverters are UL 1741 SB certified and the combiner panel and its OCPD are UL listed.
Sure. Thank you, Will, and thank you to the submittal of this question. So secondary protection with relay is required for the detection of area EPS faults and disturbances. And also, if we refer to ESB 756C section 7.6.3, this is better illustrated on the requirements that we need to have. So relays are required whenever effective grounding has to be implemented, and as a result of the system size or due to injunction point infrastructure. It provides guaranteed field settings specific to your interconnection, protects utility equipment upstream of the point of coupling under all failure scenarios, and provides also redundancy if the inverter protection, for example, fails, is misconfigured, or is defeated by software firmware issues. The other question that,
thank you for that. And then let me ask you the other one that you're, so there was, this came in during the time of your presentation, but it was asking about the timeline for the application completion and whether that will ultimately remain the same.
Mm-hmm. So, and also as mentioned earlier, it's very important that developers review the application checklist, because usually National Grid has 10 business days to review and complete the application review. However, if a hold is applied because maybe the documentation had missing information, so that was omitted, this application will go into hold. And once the hold is resolved, because these notes, of missing items were resolved by the developer, then if a project was at day one, it will come again at day one because there was a hold, and National Grid will have 1 day to complete it. Whenever the application is placed on hold at a certain date, that's where it's coming to again.
Thank you. All right, I'll do a few more. I'm working through these as quickly as I can. We'll probably give it another 10 minutes or so and see how many we can get through. Next question is, what scenarios require a change application for cases under complex review? So any change requires a change notice to National Grid. to your CEI job owner. So you submit that, they would take it to engineering and assess whether that's going to be a moderate or a significant change. And then, kind of move forward on next steps from there. If it's a significant change, it would be subject to the need for a new application to be submitted. We do look at each one of these independently with respect to the queue, from technical standpoints, from sort of project status standpoint, where it is in the study, where it is in the overall process. And all those things kind of fall in together to make a final determination of a significant versus a moderate change. From there, we do have a guidance document. I'll ask maybe Taylor to grab that, or Jamie to grab that and put that on that link in the chat. Right, so people can see. Again, that doesn't cover everything because there's just too many scenarios to cover, but it does give a little bit of guidance about what it is that we're looking for, right? The type of changes that could and would, drive a significant change. But any changes should come with a change notice into National Grid so that we can look at it. So next one is, how can we get more information about ongoing group studies and the anticipated timeline for when they're going to be completed? Next one is maybe a little bit more, next half of the question is a little bit more specific, but I think I can answer it overall. So we do post on or about the 15th of every month a group study status report. It is on our group study page on our portal. It's, I think if, depending on how big your computer screen is, when you go to that page, you should be able to see it in the top portion of it. But again, Jamie or Taylor, you can post in the chat the link to the group study page, and we update that on a monthly basis with updates to any updates we have, whether windows are open, but current status of a prior group, and should be able to answer the majority of your questions. If that doesn't do it, always encourage people to reach out to their job owner, right? The chatter function of the portal gets right to the right person who can follow up as necessary internally to get the answer. So if it's unclear, please don't hesitate to reach out. So I might group a couple of questions here, right? So it's behind the meter, BESS non-solar, so I assume standalone energy storage for peak saving purposes. What's the difference between export, non-export for the ESS, and in terms of length of interconnection complexity and the evaluation? So there really isn't any, right? A standalone battery is going to need to charge from the grid. So as soon as we factor that piece of it into the equation, a study is going to be required for that project, for that application. So the complexity of the study itself may vary depending on export versus non-export, or how you plan on using the battery. So there's a number of different factors that ultimately weigh in as to how long that would be. And then there's another one here. It's just, is there a pathway for a small behind the meter battery, right? 125 kW to 1 megawatt to be carved out of group studies. And again, the answer is no at this point, right? Because the project needs to be studied because of the load aspect of a standalone battery. So let me, Alex, I'm going to put you on the spot here for a minute. I think I got a couple questions for you. First one is, what does the process look like for if we are connected as a QF while the site awaits for net metering capacity to open, and are we granted capacity at a later date?
Yep. So fortunately, the process is not really super different. Once you are given that cap allocation, you would just submit an inquiry with that documentation, and we would then go ahead and modify the incentive rate in our billing system, and that would be pretty much all set. So there would be probably some paperwork required, but there really won't be much of a difference in process, given that you're already going to have the correct metering in place. But if SMART is part of your sort of plan, that does need to be indicated ahead of time in your initial interconnection application. So if SMART is a component there, that's a little bit of an extra step, but Otherwise, it'll be really largely the same as usual.
Great, thank you. And then next question came in when you were doing your slides. This one is related to net metering cash out, confirming that the slide said that any projects new to net metering under the cap exempt rules can cash out annually. And then please confirm this does not change anything for customers that have ACAs prior to the exempt rules that went into effect last year, and those customers cannot cash out.
Yep. Yeah. So just to clarify, so in the context of net metering, this is for facilities that are over 25 kW and under 2 megawatts that have an ISA dated after January 1st, 2021 and are serving on-site load. Those facilities are cash out eligible. They cannot be government and municipal facilities. All other net metering facilities that do not meet those criteria are not cash out eligible. So it is just for those post 1121 behind the meter 25 kW to 2 megawatt systems.
Thank you. Okay, I'll group a few more questions. I won't read them specifically, but the general gist of these questions are around timelines and better understanding the timelines, which I had mentioned earlier are just really, really difficult questions for us to answer in general. Right, I mean, all of our sort of allowed timelines exist in the tariff for pre-ISA, and then construction. We are providing a duration-based schedule in attachment 7 as part of the ISA, right? Because each scope of system modifications could be different, timelines are different, and so many different things factor in from a post ISA construction standpoint. From a pre-ISA standpoint. Right, like there's so much that goes into it. Is it a standalone impact study? Is it a group study? Right, that changes the timelines considerably. It's really, really hard to predict before an application comes in what the timeline could be. I think we'll have more information when an application is submitted or when an application is deemed complete as to what steps are in front of it. Are there active IS or group studies ahead of it? Will it be going on hold? Right? What else is in the queue? Are we expecting an ASO study to factor in an impact there? I think we'll know more, but it is really, really difficult to answer the question in general that says, hey, if I submit an application, how long is it going to take to ultimately get through? Right, I wouldn't, we touched on a lot of it in this presentation, what those timelines are, sort of as best case scenario. But I do think that we're all sort of smart enough and been doing this for long enough to know that there's a lot of caveats, there's a lot of things that factor in that have a significant impact around those timelines. So I'm obviously uncomfortable in sort of saying how long anything would take from a general overview perspective. Next quick question is National Grid updating its interconnection forms to allow for applicants to indicate that they want to pursue a flexible interconnection agreement if needed, and how will that study different? So one, it will be a different study, right? Because it's studying something different on the system, right? If there will be an opportunity in our portal as part of the application to identify an interest in going down a flexible interconnection path. So we will be aware of a project's intent to go down that type of direction. There may be other points in the process where that may pop up, and you're given an opportunity to move from the firm interconnection queue into a flex path. The one thing to be very clear about is there's no ability to sort of bounce back and forth between the two. You can go from firm to flex at certain milestones in the process. But you cannot, once gone flex, you cannot come back into the firm queue, right? Because too much stuff is changing at that point. That would be a significant change. If you realize that at the end of it, a flex connection does not work for the project, you would have to withdraw that project and reapply. But in essence, telling us, all that's going to be available as we get this rolled out and start moving, more projects into sort of a flex path. That those communication loops will exist on the portal. So staying with that, I think Arnaldo, I'll put you. Do I have anything for you? Never. No. Jamie. I'm going to put you on the spot. Never mind, Arnaldo. Jamie, this one is for projects attempting to interconnect to a feeder already involved in a group study. When the group study concludes, what is the expected timeline for held applications to resume screening and move forward?
Hi, everybody. So projects that come into queue in an area where there's already an active group study in place would be placed into the subsequent group study and also placed into the status of group study on hold behind preceding group study. So if your project has that status, you would be able to expect the group study ahead of yours. Once those ISAs are delivered for those projects in the group study ahead, we would then open the group window for the subsequent group. So there's typically 105 business days that takes place from the point that we open the window until we actually start the group study. So the pre-study commencement steps include group window, required reviews, which is where we screen projects that didn't complete screening yet to make it into that group study. And then from required reviews, we would have a scoping meeting. And then from there, group member confirmation, extended group study opt-in. Then we would draft the agreements and invoices, and then we would work with executing the agreements and receiving those payments. And then from there, the group study can commence. So based on the status of the group study ahead of yours, you can expect at least 105 business days prior to the next group study being able to commence. And then also keep in mind whatever duration is left in that group study ahead to add to that timeline. And Will already went over this, but you can refer to that monthly group study report. There's a tab that's tailored specific for projects that are behind active group studies and forecasting and what they should expect. And as always, just feel free to reach out to me separately if you have any questions about that report specifically. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you, Jamie. Okay, I got a couple more here I'll try to work through in the next minute or so. I appreciate everybody who is still on hanging out. This one is just, has National Grid considered moving their RTU process into the screening study process as opposed to being post ISA? So the RTU requirements, right, and needs are established during the study, and they're included in the impact study report. All right, so it's unlikely that we would initiate RTU installation prior to a study or a final report being delivered. We also wouldn't take any steps around that unless an ISA is signed, right, and payment made, right, because there's too much opportunity for attrition as we get into and through those steps. So it is a construction related activity. It is, does have quite a bit of it, right? I'd say the majority of an RTU installation is on the customer moving it forward. But our RTU conversations can start as early as, right, those ISA signatures, right, the 60 business day payment timeline that exists there. So we can start earlier in the post ISA process, but the idea of bringing it into sort of pre ISA feels a little bit like a stretch. I'll throw this one, kind of is coming in on the fly, so I don't know that we have someone who can answer it, but it says, after we submit an assignment letter for interest in interconnection application, how can we transfer the portal application? We want to hand it over to a different entity and remove access from our side. Anybody from the National Grid team, do you know that answer off the top of your head? If not, then we can respond back to it.
I think
Yeah,
just starting with
so
the DG inquiry. Sorry, go ahead, Taylor.
no, I was just going to say they can update their application rules on the case.
And that
so they
will
could
remove
the
access?
current, yeah, so the current developer customer that has access to the case would add in the new whoever they're transferring the project to.
And then Alex, I think you
Yep, I
complete
was going
that
to say
thought. I think
essentially
it's a
that.
good thing.
And otherwise, if there's issues with that, you can always just submit a DG inquiry with the documentation, and we can also update the case if you're not able to yourself. But either method would achieve it.
Great. And then one more question here I'll hit on real quick. Even if I did not read your question, I do, having looked at it, thought I answered it as part of another answer or as part of the slide deck. So just like I said, with respect to time, didn't want to keep this going on forever. But the last one here is that for LPC 4 and 5, could the additional BESS act as the required additional load? So I'm just going to read the answer that Dan McDonough had from our ARI team answer that, but it says no, load is used to calculate as a counter to offset the generation or discharge in the study criteria for both study and the application DER, but also for studies on the existing feeder. So that's the answer. Dan unfortunately did have to drop, so he can't dive in any deeper, but that's the answer to that question. We can always follow up, right? If you have specific questions, happy to take those and make those connections. So I think we got through basically the majority of the questions that fit into our presentation today. So again, thank you to everybody who took the time and joined in, and we will be getting out the link once everything's posted. So everybody have a great rest of the day. Thank you.